leave my house right now. You are not welcome here again.
Emeka, please.
It was raining heavily the morning Grace's husband threw her out. She had 4,000 naira in her purse, 2 children clinging to her wrapper, and 1 name in her hat. Helen. Her sister. Her investment. The one person in the world she had broken herself to build. Grace had given up her university admission at 21 without complaint. Their mother sat her down in their compound in Enugu and explained it. There was only enough money for one of them, and Helen was the sharper one, the one teachers always talked about. Grace nodded and went to learn tailoring instead. She was better than good at it. Within 3 years, she had a small shop on Ogui Road, a loyal customer base, and a reputation that spread by word of mouth across the whole neighborhood. She built that shop stitch by stitch. Every kobo went into 2 places, her children's feeding and her savings. She wore the same 3 dresses to church. She did not buy a swabi she could not afford. People called her boring. Grace did not mind. She had a plan and she was living inside it. When Helen got admission to study nursing in London, Grace did not blink. She sold the shop. She sold the land their father had left them on the outskirts of Enugu. She borrowed from her cooperative. She sold her gold earrings and the bracelet her mother had placed on her wrist on her wedding day, the one she had worn every day. When the total still fell short, she took a loan from her landlord against 6 months of future rent. She placed every penny in Helen's hands at the airport and said one thing: "Come back and make us proud." Helen wept at the departure gate. She called her Grace, her hero, her mother, her everything. She swore on their father's grave she would never forget what Grace had done, not for a single day of her life. The first 3 months, Helen called every Sunday. She described the cold, the food, the fast-walking strangers, the small room she shared with 2 Nigerian girls, and the strict lecturers who gave no grace for being new. Grace saved call credit she could not afford just to stay on the line longer each time. Then, the calls became fortnightly, then monthly. Then Grace was always the one calling first, always finding quiet reasons for why that was fine. She told herself Helen was busy. Nursing school was demanding. She was adjusting to a new country. She continued sending what she could, sometimes £200, scraped painfully over 3 months, and Helen acknowledged each transfer with a short voice note that felt increasingly like the thank you send a delivery man at the door. When Grace's husband left, everything was taken away with him. He took the television, the standing fan, the gas cooker, and the respect she had spent years building. He left a note saying she had become too focused on a sister who had forgotten her. Grace read it twice, folded it, and placed it in the bin, believing she was building something strong and beneficial. Then she sat down and called Helen. Helen did not pick up. She called again the next morning and the morning after. On the 4th day, she sent a long message. The separation, the children, the empty apartment, the debt still weighing on her. She asked for nothing. She just needed her sister to call back to say she was there. Helen read the message. Grace could see the 2 blue ticks appear and sit there, perfectly still. Helen did not reply. For 11 days, Grace moved through her life like a woman carrying something heavy with no place anywhere to set it down. She took whatever sewing work she could find, a dress altered for a job interview, an outfit for a naming ceremony, blouses let out at the seams. She worked late into the night by lamplight when the power failed, her children sleeping on a mat behind her, her machine the only sound in the apartment. On the 12th day, Grace called. Grace picked up before the 2nd ring. "Helen." Grace. The voice was tight and clipped, like someone speaking with one eye already on the exit. "I got your messages. I have been very busy." Grace waited. I cannot send money right now. London is expensive. My rent went up. I have my own problems. I hope the help you helped me was willing. Hope you are not expecting anything in return. Helen continued, you are my senior sister, and you did what a senior sister out there would do to their junior ones. So please, I'm not balanced yet. Grace looked at her sleeping children. She looked at the bare wall where the television had hung. I understand, she said quietly. That was the last real conversation they had for 2 full years. Grace wept, but did not collapse. She had learned long ago that collapsing was a luxury for people with someone to catch them. She registered her tailoring formally, secured a table at Ogri Road Market, and rebuilt from the very first stitch. Her hand had forgotten nothing. She walked with the quiet ferocity that only comes from a woman who has already met her worst fear and is still standing on the other side of it. The first 6 months was hell for her. She barely ceased stitching work, talk more full sewing work. One of her child got ill that collected the little cash she had kept for future reference. Grace cried every night, watching her children go to bed with empty stomachs. Then one afternoon, a God-sent customer named Mrs. Okonkwo, who changed the direction of her life entirely. Mrs. Okonkwo was a procurement officer at a company managing 3 hotels in Enugu State. She came to Grace on a personal recommendation. Grace made her a formal suit for a board presentation, careful time on the lining, the buttons, the exact way the shoulders needed to sit. When Mrs. Okonkwo walked into that boardroom, 2 colleagues paused the conversation before it began to ask who her tailor was. Mrs. Okonkwo returned the following week with a proposition. The hotels needed uniforms, front desk staff, housekeeping, restaurant attendants. Their Lagos suppliers' quality had been declining for months. If Grace could produce samples to the required professional standard, the contract was hers. Grace produced those samples in 8 days without sleeping properly for any of them. She checked every seam 4 times. She pressed every piece with the kind of care that comes from character, not instruction. The contract was awarded on a Tuesday morning. It was worth more in 1 year than Grace had earned in the previous 4 years combined. She paid off the cooperative loan. She paid 3 months' rent in advance and watched her landlord's expression shift. She enrolled both children in a better school with a proper feeding program. She bought an industrial sewing machine, rented proper workspace near the market, hired 2 young women she trained herself, and paid them on time every month. No celebration. She opened a savings account and filled it the way she did everything, carefully, deliberately, without making noise about it. She did not call Helen to share any of it. She simply lived it. The news about Helen came on a Thursday through their mother, who had heard it from Helen's friend Adeaze, who had heard it from someone else entirely. Helen had not been enrolled in nursing school for 8 months. The institution she had described in such detail during those early Sunday calls had no accreditation from any recognized UK body. It had collected fees from hundreds of students before UK authorities shut it down entirely. Helen's visa, tied to that school, became invalid the day it closed. She had stayed on illegally for months, working cash-in-hand cleaning shifts, sending home just enough to make everything appear fine. She had been deported 6 weeks before their mother found out. Helen was in Owerri with a distant aunt, unable to face coming back to Enugu. She had lost everything. The fees Grace had sold her land and bracelet to pay, money borrowed from people whose names Grace was now hearing for the first time, and 2 years spent in a country that had returned her with nothing but a deportation stamp. Grace sat alone with this for a long time. She thought about the shop, the land, the bracelet, 11 days of unanswered calls, 2 blue ticks sitting there unmoved like stones in still water. She thought about Helen at the airport, weeping, holding her as if she never wanted to let go. Then she picked up the phone and dialed. Helen answered on the first ring. Her voice was hollow, the sound of a person who has already condemned themselves and is simply waiting for someone else to confirm it. Grace, she said, just that. I know, Grace said. Are you eating? Silence. Helen, are you eating properly? Yes, it came out barely held together. Good. Give me 1 week, then come home. No list of what had been lost, no bill at the door, no forgiveness performed for an audience. Just those words meant the way she had always meant everything. completely without theater. Helen came home on a Saturday with a single bag and eyes that had gone somewhere that would take time to return from. She looked smaller than Grace remembered, quieter, like something at her center had been turned very low and was only just still burning. Grace fed her, gave her the better bed, sat beside her until she slept. The road ahead would not be simple. There were conversations still to happen honestly, without protection. Trust broken at the roots that would take years to regrow if it ever fully did. Grace knew all of this and did not look away from it. But sitting at her machine that evening, a new order spread across the table, her children doing homework quietly on the floor behind her. She held something solid and real inside her chest. She had not needed London. She had never needed London. She had only ever needed her 2 hands, her eye for detail, her willingness to work without applause, and the kind of character that does not require anyone's permission to keep going. Outside, the Enugu evening settled in the way it always did, warm and slow, carrying the smell of cooking from the next compound, the sound of children being called inside, the steady rhythm of a neighborhood that had seen harder things and kept moving. Grace's machine hummed. She sewed, and the quiet around her, earned for and entirely her own, felt like exactly enough. Did Grace do the right thing by welcoming Helen home after everything, or would you have closed that door for good? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to read every single one. Subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story.